What's going on, guys? I'm a regular guy with the Regular Guy Firearms channel. Thanks for watching. Okay, so it was requested by a dude that was commenting on, I think it was my last video. He was asking about particular stances and all this other stuff. What I actually want to do is launch a short series of videos on different positions. Now, the reason why it's a series of videos is because there's a lot of contextual use for a lot of different variances and different positions and things like that, so we're just going to go ahead and go through it. Today, we're going to start with the standing position. Okay, now the standing position is a default for a lot of us. If you're police, if you're urban center military deployed, even for self-defense and a lot of the other stuff. The vast majority of those type of shoots and whatnot are going to be from the standing, and that's fine. So there are varying different types of standing positions and stuff like that. And there's been a lot of little internet debates on what's to use, when and where, and all sorts of stuff like that. Mainly, what should you use, right? So what we're going to go over really is like a traditional standing position, okay? Now, what's crazy is that for, and this is when I came into the Army and stuff like that, out of like basic training, they started us in the prone position, and we ended up doing the kneeling position and stuff like that for the Army Rifle Qual. It wasn't until later on that there was actually some instruction, and this is from other schoolhouses and whatnot, that actually started to teach standing, which is a little funny, because it's the default for a lot of I hate to say the word scenarios, but really that's what it is. Now, first and foremost, what are the advantages to standing? Well, as far as standing and stuff is concerned, it is a very highly mobile position. It's easier to get going from one place to another. It's also easier to shift from one piece of cover to another. And again, if we're working on stuff like a concrete pillar or a fairly large tree and stuff, if we stay in the standing, we can rotate from one side to the other, and we can get going to other places that we need to go as well quite a bit faster. The con, obviously, is the stability thing. Your ability to hit stuff farther away with a greater degree of speed and accuracy changes, and it's usually bad, like not as good as the other positions. So mobility versus stability is usually what we have to deal with. Now, there's several different types of standing positions, and I'm just going to go ahead and start with a traditional one, right? With a traditional standing position, we're looking fairly bladed and stuff like that, okay? And for a traditional standing position, the hand is just kind of, the support hand is exactly what it is. It's a support for most of the rifle. Fire control, your fire control hand or your gun hand, all it's doing is manipulating controls. Now, as far as shooting in this manner, this isn't even really that big of a deal, okay? You can put rounds on target accurately, and you can put them on target to a fairly decent distance. The problem exists with this. Number one, for those of you that wear armor and stuff like that, in order to get the adequate bone support and everything else for this type of position, you're offering up a little bit greater access. Like, let's say that we're wearing side plates as well as our front and rear plates. But let's say that we're wearing side plates. If we get adequate amount of support on that side, okay, what we're looking at here is we're looking at greater pathways toward a hard shot on this side. Not exactly the greatest thing in the world to have to deal with. So, as far as that is concerned, it is a little bit of a trade-off if you wear armor like that. For those of us who don't wear armor and don't plan to wear armor, it's a little bit less of an issue that we have to deal with, mainly because we don't have to worry about squaring plates up to people. Now, before I move on, the squaring up to people type deal, right? Like, let's say that I'm looking straight at the camera and I'm squared up and I'm looking right at that camera, right? The issue that I run into as far as people saying, well, stay squared, stay squared, stay squared. Here's a question. Who really influences how squared up you are and what direction you face? You know, certainly it's within it. We have the input on it a little bit, but most of the time it's your threat or whatever it is that's influencing you to square up and shoot them in the first place. And that guy is going to move wherever, you know. So as far as just being able to move and all this other stuff, we see a lot of dudes turning. We see a lot of dudes just canting their whole bodies and stuff. I've seen in classes where dudes are transitioning from target to target, and rather than just shift to one spot and shoot that second target or whatever, they will rotate their entire body. Now, that's not the worst thing in the world really to do, but what we have to understand is that it's a risk versus reward type thing. Are we taking more time to present our plates square to whatever it is that we're facing and whatever it is that we're trying to shoot, or are we just going to turn and nail that thing or person or whatever in a smaller amount of time? So there's stuff to consider there. But as far as a position itself, right? Our traditional position is actually fairly stable as far as shooting things fairly up close and fairly far away. But as far as the whole, aside of the whole armor thing that we had to deal with, we have a physics thing to deal with as well. Because you are containing a sub-explosion in your chamber area here, and as gases go forward and recoil comes to the rear, that energy has to go someplace. So if we're standing there fairly bladed and we take that shot, that recoil is going to go somewhere. And all I'm doing is just pushing the gun a little bit to the rear, and it automatically wants to go high and to the left. And this is a left-handed guy. As a right-handed guy, it's actually going to be the opposite. Okay? So if we're giving a path of least resistance for it to follow, it's going to go there, right? That would be the con. The pro being, you know, it's actually pretty stable. You can hit stuff fairly far away. Now, another position that's taught to a lot of guys, and it's a very modern thing, is that we're teaching people more often than not now to get more squared up on the targets and stuff like that, raise our shoulders, get our stocks, rather than having to raise the gun higher to us. We're putting the stock in the pocket of the shoulder and raising our whole shoulders, or our shoulders up, to basically meet the rifle to our faces. Now, as far as getting squared up and on target is concerned, you can actually see, if you look straight through, and all I'm doing is demoing where the gun is going at this point, you can see that as far as the gun is concerned, it's going to recoil straight into me. And what's kind of nice about that is that there's more body mass in the way, and there's more stuff keeping the gun from rocking us real hard, and it allows us to control the gun in a much more direct way so that we can shoot quite a bit faster. And of course, like I was saying before, we're able to square our plates up to whatever it is that we're trying to shoot. Now, with this has a couple of cons. The first one being, and this is especially if you're new, getting perfectly squared up and getting super dominant over the rifle can tire you out, especially if you're fairly new to it. Now, there's also a little bit of a debate as far as what this hand is doing. Okay, we've seen a lot of guys in the past to where, you know, they're teaching super dominant grips and stuff like that, where they're coming and turning their thumb all the way over the gun, like all the way over it, and they're getting that super deep position where their arms are really high and all that other stuff. And the pro to this before, as it was being developed, is that, you know, we're able to get really deep and on top of the gun, and we're able to drive it, right? That's the word, drive it, is what everybody's saying. And here's the deal. That works. Driving the gun is exactly really what you want to do as far as recoil control, because you can keep the gun from jostling around as much as it could while you're trying to shoot a little bit faster. The problem is, and this is what I've seen before, because I used to get really involved with it, and I was bringing that thumb all the way over the top, and I would just try to drive really hard with it, is that because that hand is rocked all the way over and that thumb has come all the way over on the gun, what I've noticed is that, I'm going to square this up again, is that as I would try to drive on the left to right side, or I would just come straight up and try to drive the gun hard and then rotate to another target, this thumb would tend to wrench the gun even more in this direction, especially if I'm moving quite a bit faster. And I got a lot of reps under it. So what I ended up doing was ended up revising it. I took a couple of notes from the competitive world. They're a little bit more relaxed on this grip, and they still want you to get fairly long as far as your extension is concerned, like over the top of the rifle and whatnot. They just don't get so crazy with the thumbs. What they tend to do is they will tend to relax that thumb over the top of their gun, or let it just kind of chill on the side. And what it is that it basically gives you a really similar extension to that of a pistol. Okay, only difference obviously being that your fire control hand is much farther back. So it gives you about the same extension as a pistol. Only difference now is that you have it with a rifle. And I would venture to say that as far as being able to shoot with a pistol, standing and stuff like that, having the extension that you would normally use with it, that is an enormous amount of control. And wherever you want to go, that pistol's going to go much easier. So I'm kind of middleman as far as where the thumb goes as far as that standing position is concerned. Now, a lot of us think about faster and all of that, and we try to balance that between our speed and our accuracy and whatnot, and a lot of times we're shooting shorter distances. But what happens if we're shooting even farther away, right? Well, the one alternative is that we transition back to the old days where we're bringing the stock up higher, the gun to our eyes, right, rather than us to the gun. We're bringing the gun to our eyes, and we're getting a little more bladed, and we're supporting the rifle to shoot farther away. But what happens if you're in that tall grass and you can't see really well, or your cover's a little bit farther away, but it's still tall enough to where lower positions aren't going to get it done? Well, we have to iron out as much stability as we can now for those more distant rifle shots. Now, this isn't one of those things that looks all super sleuth, ninja-fied, operator, tactical cool, but it does come from the Olympic and the precision shooter game. Most of it's competition type stuff. I actually learned this shooting position with the CMP because I was involved on a high school rifle team, okay? And when we shot standing at like a 12 font period target, or bullseye rather, with freaking air rifles. Let's not make this bigger than what it is. We're shooting air rifles at it. I was using a Daisy 888 CO2 freaking rifle, okay? And we were using this Olympic or high power style of shooting where instead of doing all that now, we are focused none at all on recoil control or anything like that, because the number one emphasis is on accuracy, right? So what we're doing now is you'll notice that the stock is barely on the shoulder at all. I mean, like just enough to where it's there and it's not going to just slip out of place. And what I'm doing at this point is that I'm taking my hips and I'm centering, basically as I'm standing right now, I'm keeping that weight centered over my hips. And what I'm going to do at this point is that I'm going to take this foot, I'm going to drop it a little bit further back, and then rotate all of that weight onto this hip. Okay, so that the weight is straight down on that side, the side that's supporting the gun. And the next thing that we're going to do is a lot of guys will go up under the handguard and stuff like that and try to use their bicep to wedge onto the magazine itself. Okay, so they're using their bicep or whatever, or a portion of their arm or the low portion of their shoulder to actually get onto the magazine itself, and they'll just kind of sink themselves into it. Or for those of you that aren't even using a magazine-fed rifle, like you're just using a standard hunting rifle or something like that, what we used to do is that we used to use our fingers as like a little tripod underneath the handguard. We would come up underneath the handguard. We would take this elbow and situate it on this side of our body. And for me, I'm actually making contact with my hip here. so that as I settle it onto it, and again, this isn't one of those things that looks like one of those super sleuth operator, sniper, ranger, SEAL type positions, okay? But it's one of those deals where once you settle into it, and once you just kind of plop your face on there, we are as stable as we can possibly be, and we can break a shot much farther away in the standing position. Okay. Now this can be replicated with pretty much any other rifle that's out there. Okay, if you have a standard hunting rifle, AK, AR, frickin' VZ58, whatever it is, you're gonna have to fandangle a couple of things with that position. But as far as like a fighting sense, like a military sense and stuff like that, again, it is there needs to be basically required context for you to use a position like that. But then again, so is the same for everything else. You know, I mean, if we're digging into the rifle and getting real close and getting real heavy behind it to where that thing is going nowhere and we can sit there and transition from target to target, assault this way, all type of stuff. There's that. Dude's backed up a little bit farther away now. We have some stuff to like get behind, and he's a little bit farther away and we have to shoot farther. Okay, that's cool. We can adopt a regular standing position where we're looking at support. And let's say he's 300 plus yards away now, and the only position that we got is standing. Well, okay, we can modify ourselves to handle this guy who's just forever away now. But the point is that all of these require context. All of these require the individual's ability to figure out what it is that you need for that particular situation, I guess I'm going to say. Because it's up to you to figure out how difficult that is. You know, I've taken 100 plus yard line shots like so. Okay. I've taken 300 yard line plus shots like so. You'll notice I mentioned 300 yards specifically. Okay. Not too long ago. And I've used this for about basically in the middle. Okay. As far as whatever it is that I need to shoot at. And it's dependent on distance. It's really on you to make the choice on what it is that you have to use. But what I hope is that this video can help guys think a little bit on the positions that they use, the advantages to what it is that they're using, and the disadvantages, because let's be real here, there's no specific technique that's going to work for everything. And under a certain set of circumstances, all techniques are the bee's knees, and all techniques suck hard. All right, so that's my little section on standing. We're going to do kneeling and prone and seated and a few other auxiliary positions and whatnot. But, you know, here's the first one. If you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the comments box below. Go ahead and let me know what you thought about the video and any other experience that you have with various shooting positions and stuff like that. But as far as that goes, that's it for me, guys. And remember, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.